The Oculus Quest 2. Probably one of the most interesting and weird VR headsets that has ever been released. And for a multitude of reasons, on paper, it's probably the most capable VR headsets as a jack of all trades. PC VR compatibility, wired or wireless, hand tracking, standalone play using onboard hardware, and it's also one of the cheapest VR headsets ever released, $300. To give you some context as to how far we've come, I paid more than double that for less than a quarter of the features just a few years ago when I bought an original Oculus Rift, and that didn't even come with touch controllers, just one of these. And of course, there's a very real reason why the Quest 2 is only $300, but we'll talk about that later. I've had my Quest 2 since launch day, and I've used it nearly daily since. That's 9 months of pretty hardcore usage, and I've got a lot to say about what I've learned about the device, the things I've come to love, and the things I've come to despise. And this isn't just a 9-month later review of the Quest 2 and how it's held up. Don't worry, I'll fully explain that as well. But this is also a review of the immense impact Facebook and the Quest 2 have had on the entire VR industry, both the good and the tragic. So here we go. Here's my 9-month journey with the device that will likely be remembered as the headset that changed everything. So the Quest 2, it's been by my side everywhere I travel, whether that be 20 miles to a friend's house or 3,000 miles to shoot a video. It's become a tool for me both for mobile content creation or streaming, or just to kick back and enjoy some VR games. I've done AMAs and VR meetings from hotels, played Beat Saber on top of buildings, and I think most importantly, I've been able to show hundreds of people, safely of course, what VR is like firsthand, and do it easily. It's cheap enough that I could recommend it to people and it doesn't feel like a massive investment, and it's also cheap enough that it's an easy Christmas gift if you really want to treat somebody. And there's something to be said about the accessibility. You can be a Mac owner or maybe never have even touched Steam before, but you can still enjoy VR, and it's still pretty darn good VR. You can use 10% of the Quest 2's capabilities, at that point it being a Star Wars and Beat Saber machine, and still get your money's worth. Not to mention, it just does so much more than any other headset on the market. Mind you, it doesn't do any of it as good as specialized hardware, with the exception of it being a completely mobile VR headset, but it does all of it. Sometimes the whole headset costs the same as existing hardware that only does one of the functions of the Quest 2. And to not give it that credit is selling the entire product short of what it can actually do. And if you don't give it the credit, it's honestly disingenuous, probably for the underlying reason of hating Facebook and hating everything they do no matter whether it's good or bad, and probably also behind the privilege of owning a powerful PC or being able to afford an Index or better. And I understand that completely. I'm an Index user most of the time, but I'm not gonna lie here, the Quest 2 is a good platform. It's not perfect, and everything I just said probably sounds beyond amazing. But along with that does come some dark realities that paints a little bit of a different picture of this all-in-one. And don't worry, I'll touch on all of that as well. But for now, let's talk about the device specifics. How has it held up in terms of hardware, software, and reliability? So I'm not soft on my VR headsets. I'm open about this as well. Of course, I'm not usually trying to actively break my equipment, but I purposely put quite a bit of extreme stress on my VR gear, partially because I expect VR equipment and wearables to be tough, but also because if I'm extra hard on my stuff and I do find a weak point, hopefully I can tell hundreds of thousands of people so they don't do what I did, and also tell the companies too so they can fix it in future iterations. Now the Quest 2 is one exception. I did legitimately try to break one at one point. I scratched the lenses, put it in a dryer, dropped it for multiple feet through the controllers, and it freaking lived and functioned perfectly fine afterwards. This thing is a beast, or more accurately, a brick. Of course, it's still got the typical VR vampirism that all headsets have. Essentially, just don't put the lenses in direct sunlight.
The sun is a deadly laser.
But other than that, it's a rock. I've got scratches all over my headset from bouncing around backpacks and bags, and it's got marks and dents all over the controllers from smacking them into things. And if there's one thing Facebook did really right here, is they created a cheap system that will last quite a while with a lot of abuse. I mean, it makes sense. The stock head strap is just an elastic band, the headset itself is just a brick of hardware and lenses, and that's it. No fancy adjustment tensioners to break, no dials to strip, and the plastic itself is decently flexible. In the future, I kind of hope that more headsets are designed with this simplicity and robustness. These are wearables, you sweat in them. I know I smack things all the time. I mean, if you're wearing a headset, you can't see your environment, whether it's the first time you're in VR or the 5,000th. Eventually, you'll smack something hard or drop your headset or run into a wall. It's kind of inevitable. And after all this time and all my testing and even trying to break it, if you're worried about how things will hold up or the headset or the controllers or lenses, I wouldn't be. Now, I don't like this IPD adjustment that's on it, but it works and I don't personally have issues with my eyes. However, testing it on many people, it's not always the optimal configuration. And the IPD adjustment is one way I wish Oculus didn't cheap out on and they went with a normal IPD adjustment. Now, the optional head straps Oculus sells. Unfortunately, they are still a very weird thing. I've owned 2 Pro battery straps and have broken both. The first I was really rough with, the second I was extra careful with, and both suffered the same fate of cracking and eventually breaking. Oculus will and does actively replace these for no extra charge for 2 years after purchase, so if you don't mind more than likely having to get these replaced once or twice, then I suppose you could go with that, but there are a litany of other head straps from third parties you could try, and maybe I'll make a mega video of the absolute best head straps you can buy in the future looking at all of them, but for now, I actually just use the elastic head strap that it came with since it works, it's hard to break, and while it's far from the most comfortable headset I've ever used, it's small and easy to transport and reliable, and it works good enough for 2 to 3 hour sessions. And 2 to 3 hour sessions brings us on to battery life. I don't have a clear number of times I've charged and discharged my Quest 2's battery, but it's been a lot. I've noticed pretty clear battery degradation, and sometimes I've struggled to even hit an hour and 45 minutes of usage. The battery life isn't exceptional, and sometimes if you're playing something intensive, it's downright bad. And the Pro battery strap that I bought for this exact reason just isn't reliable. So instead, I just always keep a battery bank with me. It feels like sometimes I'm charging the Quest 2 more than I'm actually using it, especially when it seems to just turn on its own quite often. Lately, I've just been using the VR Power for convenience, and it makes things slightly more comfortable, but anything works, and if you do have a Quest 2 or are planning on getting one, even a $20 battery bank can make that low battery life far more bearable. And it's probably the one accessory, besides of course the pink ThrillSeeker VR cover, that I recommend to anyone that's a hardcore user of the Quest or Quest 2, regardless of battery bank brand. And now onto the less exciting and less positive parts of the Quest 2 and VR in general, to be honest. The software. Let me start with the good stuff first. Since the Quest 2's launch, it's gotten update after update after update. If you're ever worried about Oculus dropping support for the Quest 2 like they did with the Rift S, leaving thousands of users with fundamental issues that never got fixed, you can rest a little easy. Quest platform is clearly the direction that won the previous battle between the Rift S and Quest, and it just keeps winning, selling tons of software and hardware. Not only have some things been fixed, although there are some things that need fixing, but new features have come every couple months, as I'm sure you're aware of. So far, here's what we've gotten in just the past 9 months. 90 Hz refresh rate baseline, 120 Hz support, faster hand tracking refresh rate, infinite office, keyboard support, and one of the biggest, AirLink support, which brings Wi-Fi 6 wireless PC VR support, making it one of the best wireless PC VR headsets just built into the software from the factory. The update support for the Quest platform almost surprises me every single update. The functionality of the headset just keeps improving and you get more functionality. And yeah, there have been broken updates, but you have to admit for the most part, over software, the Quest is capable of more and more every month. Now, the bad part of the software, just the lack of content. To a brand new user, there's a lot to offer, but the actual software catalog size of quality pieces is pretty small. There are a handful of must-own games, then beyond that, the amount of really good software games is really lacking. Now, this will get better over time, and the problem is further minimized if you have a PC to play PC VR content as well, but beyond these games, if you're expecting a PlayStation 4 or Xbox size catalog of games, you'll likely be very disappointed. The same 4 games I've been playing since launch basically are the same 4 games I play to this day. And that's not because I haven't tried new things. That's because there just aren't many new things that grab my attention for long terms. There are lots of great 3 to 4 hour experiences that I play once and then uninstall to make room for the next 3-hour experience. Sadly, I don't see this changing, at least not in the very near future. Next year or 2 years from now may paint a very different picture, but I'm talking now, not a hypothetical future where a bunch of games drop. So the Quest 2 in terms of hardware has held up great. It's really a tough piece of tech, and I think you could be rough with it. A kid can own it and treat it badly, and it'll probably hold up. And software updates are plentiful, and you could do more and more with the platform all the time. But the actual game catalog can be limiting, especially if you're expecting some massive game catalogs like you may be used to on other gaming platforms. But what about the impact of the Quest 2? Well, since launch, in terms of sales momentum, it's outpaced any 6DoF headset ever created by as much as 3 times. This includes the PSVR, which still has one of the largest install bases for VR ever. This is partially because the pretty full package that is the Quest 2, but also because of the price. It's $300. And Facebook no doubt technically loses money on every single headset sold. The price is subsidized by Facebook, and it's all part of a long-term plan. Build an ecosystem around cheap hardware, lock people into a platform, and the biggest thing here, the exodus of the Oculus account and introduction of the required Facebook account. Now, some people don't care, and some people care a lot. I'm personally in the camp of, I wish we didn't have to do this. And the extremely low price of the Quest 2 has had tons of other effects. Nobody can compete with the Quest 2, flat out. It's too cheap, too capable, and too powerful, and has way too many developers directly behind it. Facebook has also purchased many of the most talented VR developers out there to develop for their platform, and likely only for their platform. But we'll see how that part plays out in the future, and if more Oculus Studio games get Steam VR support. The thing is, it's just too damn good, and nobody right now dare compete directly in a similar price range as the Quest 2 for consumers. To give you an idea, I almost guarantee, say hypothetically HTC Vive were to throw everything they had, and legit, this is everything they have, behind essentially a $300 HTC Vive XR2 powered standalone / wireless PC VR headset, set to directly compete against Facebook. Also, just like Facebook losing money on every device sold, Facebook would just drop the price to $250. They have that kind of power. There's a very clear message out there from Oculus. Don't even try to compete. And we're watching a monopoly happen right in front of our eyes, and there's nothing we can do about it because, well, the Quest is too good, too cheap, and it's the first time VR has had a real taste of early mainstream. It's affected game development as well. When you can make 10 times the profits developing for Quest and Quest 2, a lot of PC VR games have pivoted development towards being ran on Oculus hardware. Now, I'm not gonna act like I know exactly what's good for VR. And maybe this is great. In a lot of ways, more players, more headsets sold, more software sold. What's the holdup? Isn't this what we all wanted? Yeah, it is. But one company right now owns a majority of the highest grossing VR game development studios, has 100% control over consumer standalone VR market in the West, and also dominates the PC VR market with over 60% share. Look, I think of it this way. Let Facebook dump the hundreds of millions that they are into VR. Let them pay and pave the way to make VR mainstream and financially viable for consumers and developers. At that point, Google or Amazon or Apple and of course Sony with PSVR literally won't have an excuse to not jump into the VR market and pose as competition. Once the true mainstream breakthrough occurs, probably around 20 to 40 million headsets later, nobody will be able to ignore the VR industry. But for now, this is pretty much the only way to get someone into VR on the cheap. And it just happens to be pretty damn good VR, even 9 months later. Not gonna lie, this makes me uncomfortable. But this is also the exact thing we've been asking for as VR enthusiasts for years. And even though these statistics scare me, even after all this time, I can still easily recommend the Quest 2. But no, that's also because there's really nothing else in its price range that I possibly could recommend, even if I wanted to. Thank you to all of my Patreon supporters, especially the Omegas you see here. I couldn't do any of this without you. Don't forget to like this video if you loved it, subscribe if you want more of this, and hit that freaking bell if you just can't live without it. Much love, Thrill out.